Welcome to Welfare Clinic. Today we're going to be talking about mental health and domestic abuse. These are two of the most important issues that affects all of us at some point in our lives, especially mental health or depression. I have three fantastic guests with me once again this evening, and I'm going to introduce my guest to you. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel, London Bangla, Facebook page, and if you have any questions, you can post comments or questions. You may be also able to call us uh, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to make. My first guest is Farida Momtaz. She is a poet, a writer, and cognitive behavioral therapist. I will say a little bit more about my guest throughout the program. Farida, welcome to the show.
Hi, Oliur. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening. My second guest is Ruhena Akhtar, psychotherapist, counselor, independent domestic advocate. Ruhena, welcome to the show.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for joining us. And my next guest, somebody who's been before on my show, Shanaz Parvin. She's a diet consultant over 10 years, NLP practitioner, and Alaska was NLP stand for. And she's also an entrepreneur, owners of multiple businesses. And I'm sure we'll get down to know a little bit more about Shanaz, what she's doing. So welcome, Shanaz, to the show.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here. NLP is a neuro-linguistic programming, so a lot to do with language, mindset, and lots more.
Okay, it's going to be interesting. Apologies for some of the pronunciation if I did it wrong at the beginning. So we'll start off with Farida. Farida, just tell us a little bit more about what you do, and because I know you have worked as a family support worker for local authorities for many years, and what do you do and how you work around those issues that affects families and individuals?
Sure. So my background is I worked for the London Borough of Haringey for 12 years as a family support worker. And my specialism was to support survivors of domestic abuse. So that ranged from delivering group and individual programs such as the Freedom Programme to helping with everyday practical issues and also helping with more severe extreme issues such as helping women to leave an abusive relationship and find a refuge. But while in my job, I realized that with domestic abuse, there was also a lot of mental health difficulties. And in order for my clients to move forward, we had to address these, but find ways to manage these mental health difficulties as well. So then I trained as a cognitive behavioural therapist, and I would use these strategies with my clients to move them forward. But I thought that there was another way to do it, because sometimes it could be quite intimidating and people weren't necessarily ready to speak about the issues so openly. So I started using cognitive behavioural therapy in a creative way, predominantly with poetry. We do things like looking at reversal poetry, looking at negative thoughts and how to change that. So what I do at the moment, I no longer work for the local authority. I have a business where it's called the Power of Poetry Programme, and I deliver this program in different settings, and we use it creatively. So we use CBT and poetry together in order to address mental health difficulties, work through issues and find strategies to manage.
And when you work for local authority, because I know as a former counsellor myself, a lot of the cases do come through the doors of local authorities, whether it be domestic abuse, whether it be mental health, whether it's housing related or children's health or anything, disability. It could be a number of issues. What kind of cases did you get? Just the flavor of it in general. What kind of cases did you get? What kind of cases did you get to see?
there was a range of cases. As I said, there were some extreme cases where that woman and the children needed to leave that home, and we needed to come up with a strategy of how we're going to get her out slowly, find her a refuge, etc., etc. Then there were more low-level, subtle cases. So it might have been emotional abuse that had been going on for a long time. Sometimes the woman in the relationship didn't actually realize what was happening. There was also a lot of coercive control that I came across. So, for example, I had a Bengali client who had only gone 5 minutes past her house. She'd lived in the UK for over 20 years, but she had never gone 5 minutes past her house by herself. She had no access to her bank accounts, although she did have a bank account in her name. Benefits were being paid in her name. However, she wasn't actually aware of it. And it was only when we got involved and we had to look through all of these documents that I asked her, and she was completely unaware that A, she had a bank account, or B, that, you know, there was money being paid into it, or C, how to go any further along from 5 minutes down the road. So she would take her children to school, but she couldn't go shopping by herself. She couldn't engage with the community. She didn't have friends. And going back to what you said about we get a lot of cases through the doors in the local authority, that was one of the reasons why I decided to train in cognitive behavioural therapy, because actually there's a long list for counselling services and mental health services. And sometimes you can't move forward without addressing some of the initial issues that are there. So while the CBT may not have addressed everything in depth, it helped to overcome some issues so we could move forward a little bit with our planning and basically helping the family to get into a better position.
Thanks for that, Farida. Can I move to Ruhena? Ruhena, you are a counsellor, you are an independent domestic advocate, you're a psychotherapist, so you cover quite wide range of issues, and I am sure you come across people from all sorts of background and culture who going through those kind of issues and problem that they are facing. In your experience, from everything, because I know you also run your own business, I think, private counseling practice for mental health.
That's right.
Because we come across, especially a lot of women from South Asian community that goes through depression and mental. And I think one thing that I always think about, because when we say I got mental health problem, people think, is this person mad?
Yeah. That is a stigma attached.
That's what I was saying. So in your experience, what do you think? Why do you think that our community, even in 21st century, still have those thoughts in their mind? Why do they still think like that?
I think it's a multiple of things. People have that mindset. I mean, mental health in itself, I mean, the word mental health, like you said, it's that extreme where the stigma is attached and people refer to it to the extreme of somebody that has a complete inability of their mind. And that isn't the case. And mental health can, as Farida said, it could be low levels of mental health to extreme levels. And we don't acknowledge the low levels, and even culturally, we don't want to accept or acknowledge it. There's a lot of barriers that are in place that aren't spoken about. And I think it's a lot of, it's lack of awareness, it's lack of education and knowledge, because, you know, as I said before, it's, you know, being unaware and stereotyping certain mental health. So, I mean, depression is in the category of mental health, but it's a low level. It's not seen as something like psychosis or a different diagnosis where perhaps a psychiatrist would intervene. And I think at the same time, interventions can be, you know, it can have different experiences, and it can have various outcomes for people. I mean, especially in South Asians and the BAME community, there's a lack of specialist services out there that acknowledge the cultural aspects of things. So to be able to address the mental health from that perspective
from your experience, and before just ask you that, let me remind our viewers about our phone number is 0208 1234507. So 0208 1234507. You can call us and ask any questions. If you want to ask questions in Bengali, please feel free to do so, and we will be more than happy to answer. You Farida mentioned something, Ruhena, in terms of controlling, and the lady wasn't aware of her bank accounts and all of that.
Mhm.
And through my working life, I come across a lot of those cases,
Yeah.
even now.
Mhm.
Why do you think? Do you think we men are kind of afraid of women, or what is it that? Because although I'm smiling, but it's a very serious issue, and I always try to understand that why people think like that. Why do they behave like that?
Okay, so in terms of historically, the man's been the, I suppose, the breadwinner, or the seen as the dominant person of the house, and in therefore, has been the one that's taken care of the household, and that includes finances and so forth. And I think now it's modern times moving on. This controlling aspect of things has become to another level. Women want their independence. They want to be able to have a certain amount of freedom. Men, in terms of controlling, it's multiple reasons, and some of it could be what they've learned. So it's learned behavior. Some of it is insecurity. Some of it is culturally, that we're unaware that these are actually controlling behaviors, and they're unhealthy controlling behaviors as well. So they may not be aware, because perhaps their father or their mother, or uncles, grandparents, whoever it may be, that they've observed certain traits, certain behaviors, and it's become the norm. And when a female role, culturally, traditionally, has been in the home, looking after the home, why do you need finances? Why do you need a bank account? Why do you need access to money? I'm here to provide for you. So it's certain attitudes towards this control, and allowing women to have the level of freedom. And it's, I suppose, can be quite threatening for men as well. And I've spoken to many men and perpetrators as well. And it's their perception of, it's their way of having control, their way of staying in control, their way of, oh, I'm the man, I'm the breadwinner, she doesn't need this level of.
But that's not the case now, isn't it? In 21st century, many women, even our daughters, our sisters, our mothers, they are, well educated, well established. Look at, three of you on my show today. Every single one of you are established within your own right. You are leaders in your own right, and you are doing best as you can for your family, and you're providing the best possible service to the community. So, I sincerely think that this is something that we men should be proud of, rather than feeling in any way being threatened. Because I want to see, I have a daughter, and I always say, I want to see my daughter do fantastically well. I want her to fulfill her aspiration. I want her to achieve what she wants to achieve, and I am there to support her from the behind.
Yeah, it is a lot of to do with equality. Women now, they want that equality, and they've been fighting for equality for many, many years and decades. And, when we look at equality on the outside, actually, do we have the equality in the house? How are siblings treated? How are brothers and sisters within the household? How are they treated? And even that now, there's excuses made for the boys, they're excused from certain, even like silly things like washing the dishes, and whereas the daughter, the cooking, is that role that's always seen. And where I see is equality, it needs to start within the house. We're searching for equality outside, but women want that, and they've worked hard for it. A lot of them are educated, they know their rights, and they want to progress and develop. And we've seen like you said, many, many successful women out there that are fighting against the grain, and they have to work harder to get that, that little bit further.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shanaz. Can I come to you now? Obviously, during this pandemic, the disease that every single one of us has been going through. Many people, their depression, their anxiety, their mental health naturally got affected. Many elderly people were shielded for almost 12, 13 weeks. Many people with significant health problem wasn't allowed to leave their homes, wasn't allowed to visit their parents. And that naturally had a psychological effect on people. At the same time, many people stop their exercising and usual stuff that they would do. They put on weight, they get even more depressed because obviously if your body is not the way you want to look, sometimes that can naturally affect you. And how do you think that people can overcome from all of that?
Well, firstly, I think the anxiety has affected everybody subconsciously. I think the stress is there for everyone. Just to overcome things. I mean, I've been saying to people, look, take a day as it comes, don't overdo it. Do one thing at a time. It has been quite a overstressed load for a lot of people, including myself. I don't think I felt it so obviously, but having a family and doing multiple things from home, sudden changes of pattern, that itself took a bit of time. Now just coming around to it, I say to people, just take the things at a time. It is really, really important to start doing simple exercises, go for walks. Walks are the best thing to do. Doing simple, like my mum that came around earlier on, and I said to her, and she was talking to me about not feeling great, and I think what she's talking about is feeling anxious, and I just made her get up and just skip and go in the garden and just do a little bit.
What would, so to interrupt, what would you say to women who are out there where Farida has described, where ladies might not be able to go out more than 5 minutes of their house because some people may live in that fear, and we know from the national charities who have worked tirelessly, we know from the Home Office data, the abuse rate, the mental health, all of those have increased so much, which is unbelievable, actually.
Yeah, it has.
And what would you advise to those women? How do you see them overcoming that difficulties that they are faced with?
If they're at home and they are facing all these difficulties, and if they have some sort of support network, because that's the most important thing. Going back to the question you asked earlier on, why do women find difficult talking about their problems and approaching? I personally have come across a lot of people who have coached myself who suffer from mental health. I think it's having clear network, knowing who to go to, because they're also very, very worried about being labeled. Some are worried about their jobs being taken, some worried about confidentiality, and some people just don't know where to go. I've had chat with so many people, and just to reassure them. So I think my advice to those people is reach out, because there are services out there. Reach out, talk to people, and get the support that you need. That's the key thing. Once you get the support you need, then you can take a day as it comes. Because yes, I can understand it is really difficult for those people who've been suffering and they're stuck at home. And if they've got no one to talk to, that makes it 10 times harder. Especially, I don't know if family support network isn't there, it makes it 10 times worse. But I always say there is always someone, out there that you can reach out to, that you can talk, who'll be won't be there to judge you.
Do you think a lot of the families, if women go, because I know you get loads of support from your other half, your family members, and you're able to fulfill your aspiration. But do you think a lot of families, without disrespecting anybody, that lack that little bit of understanding when their daughter or niece or somebody goes to them and say, look, this is the kind of difficulty I'm facing, do they say, oh, don't worry about it, the problem will go away, it will go away, don't
Yeah,
worry about
100%. That happens all the time. But then this happens all the time in our community. And I've said this to you before, that it's lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. And I truly believe is if you don't have a tool yourself and you don't know what the right thing to say, a simple thing as if somebody's, coming out in the open and talking to you and asking, seeking out for help. The common thing I can't speak on behalf of everyone, I don't think it'll be fair, but some families may actually put you in the right direction and say, things like prayers will ease off the pain, or don't worry about it, it's nothing really serious, it'll go away. So people do push it away.
Do you think a lot of people turn to religion solely,
Yes.
and there is no practical element of providing that support?
The practical element isn't there, personally, I believe, is because, I mean, how many people have the experience? How many people do actually face these things? And how do they actually handle the situation? Until the situation falls in your lap, you really don't know how to deal with things. It's a simple thing as a language. What do you say to somebody who's opening up, coming speaking to you and crying out for help? Yes, not that I'm saying religion doesn't work. I think religion is really, really important, and yes, you should use it at the right price. But if somebody is suffering, and it depends on the level of mental illness they have, that is, unfortunately, it's not the way that they will go forward. At that time frame, they actually need to deal with the situation. But yeah, unfortunately, it does happen, and people do try to brush it under the carpet, and it just doesn't go away. It's always going to be there until somebody supports them and they actually reach out. Families are, my opinion, is never the best people unless they have the experience. If the support network is strong, and you believe that, yes, they're the one you can open up to. If they don't have the expertise, they don't have the experience, they don't have the tool, then it's not necessarily their fault. They don't, as much as they want to help you, I don't think they know how to help you.
Thanks for that, Shanaz. Farida, in terms of, can I just ask you, because you mentioned something earlier on where I think you or Ruhena, somebody mentioned in terms of not is spoken much. Do you think our community, or the South Asian community in general, rather than just focusing on Bangladeshi community, do you think we worry about what other people will say? Is it because reason I ask you this question, because I see people talk about all sorts of issues on social media and everywhere, but you never see people talking about mental health or domestic abuse or sexual abuse, all of that, because there is something called rape in marriage that that I believe in personally, but many people will disagree with me profoundly. They say that's I'm talking rubbish, but I feel that every woman have their right to say no to something and yes to something. And you can tell from my voice that I feel quite passionately about stuff like that. But why do you think our community so afraid to talk about those issues that affecting people in many ways? Because we see from my research, I came across where people have gambling problem, drinking problem, financial problem, especially if men don't have any money, doesn't have a job, then he intends to come home and take it out on the children and family.
I think there is a shame and a stigma attached to many of these issues, such as mental health, such as domestic abuse, such as gambling. And I think there's a lack of dialogue. So, for instance, when I was doing my master's dissertation, I came across something called the Begum syndrome. And that was where a lot of Bengali women were presenting at the GP with physical pains. And there was actually no physical reason for this pain. So a bit more research was done, and it transpired that this was because of loneliness. It was because they weren't able to express what was happening. So mental health can have a physical impact as well. But what they were lacking more than anything else was a space to express their feelings, a space to be heard. So I think it was Ruhena that said, you need to be able to talk to somebody. I think we lack things in our community, and this isn't just the Bengali community, I think it's the BAME community in general, where you may have helplines, but do you have anything spoken in our language so that a Bengali woman who can't necessarily speak English very well can pick up the phone and be heard? Because yes, sometimes family isn't the best place to go, and with domestic abuse it can present in many different ways. So I think what I was explaining to you about the coercive control in the freedom program that I delivered, there were different characters, different types of perpetrators of abuse, and one of them was the king of the castle, and the king of the castle is the one that controls everything, the money, what you eat, when you go out, who you see. But it's become very normalized. So I think you said, well, I'm looking after you, that should be enough. We're not being given the space or the voice right? So I think that's a major issue. And we just don't have the space either to come together. And it is due to a lack of education as well. So a lot of women may think, oh, he's looking after me, that's great. And that is good. But in that space, are you able to also input? Or is it just that the other person is, you know, taking over the whole scenario?
Ruhena, in terms of obviously when it comes to domestic abuse or mental health, we always think of about, we know the men also go through depression, anxiety, even some level of domestic abuse, because we know from the data, 786,000 men since 2019 suffered some form of domestic abuse. We also know from my own research where people come from abroad because they don't have the visa status. The wife or the partner can be very controlling. So have you had dealing with men victims or people who's going through depression, mental health, any of them? Because as a man we have this pride, don't we? You know, oh, I'm the man, you know, I should be able to do all of that.
Yeah.
And when you're not able to fulfill, it can naturally affect you.
Yes, I have had experience with male victims as well as female victims, and I can understand where you're talking about the immigrants that come over, perhaps on a spouse visa or so forth, and they feel that they are under, so to speak, their wife's control and have to adhere to all of her decision making and her requests. I mean, you know, with fear and controlling behavior, you know, it comes very, you know, it can be quite skeptical. And I think that's a topic in itself, in terms of spouse marriages and how they feel about when marriages break down and they've only come for the visa and not for themselves. So they have that insecurity as well. And I think a lot of their behavior has got to do with their own insecurities. And they feel that they need to stay in control, otherwise they will lose the control, and you know, he will then dominate the relationship. For me, my belief is more about having that equality, and why should there be a dominancy in the relationship? You may have strengths and different strengths, and you may have weaknesses, and about enhancing each other. And why should there be that dominancy? Can we not help one another to grow and allow that growth? And what Farida was saying earlier, that, you know, we've got choices and women want choices. And sometimes they feel that before my choices get taken away, I'm going to, you know, react first and keep those where I have him in a certain level of, I suppose, inequality. And he is in need of me.
You might be right on that, because I know from my work in the community for last 15-20 years, because many people's attitude do change once they get their legal status to stay in this country, and then they seem to become the dominant partner in the relationship, rather than other way around, where it might have been their previous.
There are many people that go into relationships, you know, and they get married to females, even, you know, abroad, back home, and they sometimes are the pressures of the family, and it's that abuse within the family. And we're not talking about relationships between husband and wife, we're talking about abuse between siblings or parents, where they want, you know, they're getting them married for different reasons, and they feel that pressure that they have to get married to who their families say, and they may carry on, but they may have a partner here that they wanted to get married to, or so forth, or they divorce that woman. And these women that I've worked with in a counselling mental health capacity, as well as being an advisor and supporting them practically, and they are left in limbo. They are left with nothing. Sometimes, you know, and a lot of them have no recourse to public funds. Some of them don't have refuge spaces, and there's you know, you probably can count a handful of refuge spaces for people and women with no recourse to public funds. So there, you know, there is a flip side to both. I mean, yes, men do get abused, and even when I work with women and we do our trainings and deliver them on work in mental health, we also explain to them and try and for them to, whilst empowering them, to say, to be mindful not to become abusers, because sometimes that fear of, I've gone through this journey, I've been through hell and back, I've gone through abuse, I'm not going to let another man treat me this way. And sometimes that can then create them to be abusive themselves. And we don't want that either. We don't want abusive females. We don't want abusive men. We want to be able to show that you can have equality at the same time. You can help one another grow. And, and it does affect mental health for both women and men. And one thing I do say to the men, even in unhealthy relationship, is that unhealthy relationship, when you're controlling a woman in a relationship and she's unhappy and she becomes depressed and there's a lot of anxiety attached and stress and family pressures, that's going to impact your relationship. And when it starts impacting your relationship, it's going to, you're going to be the bearer of that as well. And you're going to be unhappy. So, there is consequences for that controlling relationship. Either she will eventually leave or she'll stay, and it will impact the relationship. If children are involved, children get affected, their mental health gets affected, children witness abuse, and we see that on many, many occasions, and sometimes that becomes norm for them, and they normalize it, that this is how a relationship is, and this is what we don't want, is that children to feel that abusive relationship is the norm, because this is what they know, this is what they're being brought up around. And then this cycle of mental health and abuse, it just continues, and it's about breaking the cycle, whether it's culturally, traditionally, we need to break the cycle, otherwise it just continues. And yes, there are support out there, but there isn't specialist support out there, and support is getting squeezed. The whole system is getting squeezed.
No, absolutely. And Shanaz and Farida, you guys can come in the discussion if you want to say something.
I wanted to say something on,
sure.
She added that I do actually know a lot of people, and I totally agree with you there, that a lot of people who, the support system is very limited. I actually do know a lot of people who suffer in the family, but they don't know how to come out. They don't know who to go to. And it's so limited that even if they do decide to depart from their partners and they're stuck with home, there's financial difficulties, there's homing, and the system is so squeezed that even though they've tried it, they feel like they go nowhere. So it is really challenging. I know, we do say that seek out, but it's actually when you're actually doing it physically yourself, trying to help somebody, it is really, really challenging.
And sometimes coming out isn't an option for them, because their families have added that extra pressure, because if they come out, it has a stigma, or maybe their sister or their brother, or has shame on the family, and this whole cycle it goes. So it's like, no, you have to stay in that relationship, and it's no option. And
do you guys think, Ruhena, Shanaz and Farida, do you guys think that it's sometimes the family pressure or the interference of the family members can create more problems than actually do good?
They can, but there's reasons behind it too. And for me, I understand where the family is coming from, because when you have maybe a family of daughters, it's difficult being in a society with females. You're already, frowned upon, you're already facing challenges, and you're going. So when you have a daughter that's facing a difficult marriage, say, then to get another daughter married, for a proposal to come, things like that, is like, oh yeah, the sister's not getting on in that marriage, and people do their own.
But I often use the example of Prince Harry. He's a royal, he's His Royal Highness. If a member of a royal family can marry a black divorcee woman, what's so special about anybody else?
But a society hasn't accepted divorce.
Exactly.
We're not ready, and the Bengali community are still seen as, oh, she must be divorced for a reason. They blame the women still. Women are still always in a divorce. 9 times out of 10, it's always the female's fault. And it's not just the men blaming the females, it's the females blaming the females.
But
there is
do you
Not
think
only
it's
that, they also have the pressure of, especially when they have children, they also have the
Yeah.
pressure of being a role model. You know, they don't
Yeah.
want to let their kids down.
Yeah.
So it's not the pressure of just society, family, they've got their kids and then themselves as well. So they're almost like, do I bite my tongue and just live my life like
but
this?
do you not think, Shanaz, it's much better to be out of a relationship than staying in a relationship which is psychologically affecting you, mentally affecting you, or your children witnessing all sorts of things that they shouldn't be witnessing, and start having a psychological and mental effect on them for longer terms?
Of course, if you're suffering, everybody suffers. Subconsciously, your kids are going to be witnessing behavior, you know, and they will eventually, it will have an impact in their life and they will model it at some point in their life. So yeah, you know, but like I said, it's one of those things, it's easier said than done until you're in it. And when you're
And how
in
do you
it,
know it's better? If you're in it, how do you know? How does that person know it's better? It's the fear of the unknown. How do they know coming out of that is better? I mean, a lot of these women, they may be very dependent. You know, they might have gone from their parents' house to their husband's house, and they've never actually experienced living independently, working, you know, and that kind of thing. So sometimes it's like the better the devil you know rather than the don't. And being a divorcee woman, you know, a woman out there, it carries its own level of challenges and stigma. And sometimes they don't want that, you know, to look down upon, which that is happening in society. And one other thing I was going to say is very, very important. Women with children, for them to come out of a relationship and leave themselves vulnerable, especially if they have girls, you know, whether they're going to restart another relationship, go into another marriage, they have that fear, you know, about they're protective of their children, they're protective of a further abuse, which we know, and I know from many, many victims, that happens. Women get preyed upon if they've got children. Sometimes they are targeted because of their children, especially daughters. So they have that added worry.
Can I just also say another important thing is knowledge. It's understanding what domestic abuse is. So domestic abuse is about power and control. It's not about having a bad day, having an argument. Do you know what I mean? It's about this ongoing cycle of power and control. And that loss of power or that helplessness is what leads to mental health difficulties. So we need that knowledge. We need people to know what's normal and what's acceptable and what's not. And these are conversations that we really need to have within our community.
Yeah, and that level of power doesn't happen overnight. Perpetrators are very, very clever and smart in how they get to that level of power and control. They're not going to come and get married one day and the next day they're starting to control. It happens in very small drips that even the victim themselves don't know that they're under that amount of power and control. And it's the psychological factors of feeling worthless, and they start, you know, chipping away at them. And if they're chipping away months, years and years, you know, it's that level of lack of self-worth, you know, low self-esteem, all of that, you know, that power and control, they're not even aware. And you could have somebody,
it makes them believe that this is you are the one who's causing all the problem. And then also they get to that stage where they've got no confidence whatsoever, and they start blaming themselves.
And they take their support network out as well.
But there is things like where people, if somebody suffer from anger, you know, they get angry very quickly or unable to control themselves, they can go for anger management course and also so there is support out there, but it's whether individuals choose to take on those support and change their life for better.
But perpetrators don't always show that level of anger. You know, you're looking at the extreme. I mean, if a perpetrator can get what they want from their victim without showing that level of anger, you know, then they're going to do it. And the other things, they have like two faces, like when one out in society, out in public, and one at home. If that victim was to tell somebody on the outside, maybe friends or family, about their partner, they probably won't even be believed, because they're like, oh, this person, you know, they come across really nice, or they, you know, we've spoken, we have never had problems. So it's one of those situations where then they start believing that they're going mad.
Yeah. Some of the clients that I used to work to, they would actually prefer the violence to the build-up, you know, because then it was, at least I know what's happening. It was the subtle violence, it was the name calling, it was the huffing and puffing and the bad looks and that constant, you know, keeping them in this anxious state that was worse sometimes than the actual violence.
And these ones have known that they've gone to panic attacks. You know, they've left and they didn't even acknowledge, they didn't know why they were getting panic attacks until, you know, I've known clients and they were having panic attacks and they didn't understand it, and they were going to the doctors, and then the doctor was asking them, you know, what's home looking like, and started to take the time to find out. And it was like, then it started to unravel that actually it's all that build up of that psychological, emotional abuse. And a lot of times, you know, they make even their close loved ones believe that they're the ones at fault. You know,
but you know, Ruhena touched on something which is quite important. It's about when you talk to somebody, they are believing you or they're not being judgmental towards you. Because I have, so, you know, obviously, mainly women's are affected when it comes to issues such as this, because if you look at it, 1.6 million women got abused since March 2019 compared to 786 of men. So women percentage is always much higher than men. But nonetheless, it's like, you know, even if you're a man and if you get abused and you go, because I took somebody to police station and the policeman just laughed, you know, because he found it quite hard for a man to get abused or men to get assaulted by a woman. But also when it comes to women, it's when they go and talk. It's like what Ruhena said, it's that always women's fault, but not necessarily. It can go both ways, and there's a two side to any story. But I think if I come and tell you something, and if you're straight away judgmental, oh, Ollie, it's your fault, then it naturally puts me off from talking to anybody else, I guess, and that's when they start suffering in silence.
Not everyone has an open mind. You do have to judge your people, unfortunately, when you're speaking to. I know if there was something that it was bothering me, then I don't think necessarily I'll be speaking to, you know, anyone. I will choose the person who I will speak to. So I do know where you're coming from. Unfortunately, you do have to.
But reason I'm saying that, Shanaz, because obviously not everybody may have the opportunity to choose who they go to, because they may have just, you know, extreme cases where there is you know, very exclusive group of people that they can talk to, because obviously from the community we come from, you know, we don't want our story to be broadcast. We don't want people to know our personal stuff, and it's quite difficult to trust, because in social media world it's quite easy to defame somebody, that damage them.
Yeah, I think we do need a system in place for the community. So as I said, you have helplines, but do you have helplines in Bengali where a woman can call up anonymously and speak her problems through? And that way she's not being judged. She doesn't have to take it any further, but she's having that space to be heard. So we really need to think about how we can move forward and how we can have the right systems in place to support our women.
And it's also the female, sorry, I was going to say, you know, when you're saying talking on the phone, sometimes it's the females in the house that are actually the ones that preventing that. So they might prevent her from making the call, or they might, when the husband comes home and saying, oh, you know, your wife, you know, made a phone to such and such. So then it's kind of, you have to then think about the safeguarding aspect of the thing, of it all. And, you know, or if they're starts communicating with certain people, maybe a neighbor, they start monitoring them. And it's a lot of times it's the females that actually are the ones that are, you know, are being more oppressive than the men.
It's not only the systems, as you said, it's also that education, I think. So
that's what I was saying, that it's the tools, it's the language is such a big thing, and I think you just noted that language is such a big thing, just to express yourself and explain that. I mean, I was talking to Ollie about this, that there isn't such vocabulary in Bengali to express certain emotion. And you know, I've been in a situation where I find it extremely difficult. So I can imagine people when they're in that situation, how do they actually voice out exactly what's there going on, unless there is a support out there, unless there is someone who actually understands exactly what it is that they're trying to say. So we do need to create something. I definitely
can I ask you, Farida and Ruhena, because you guys are directly involved or have worked with these issues, do you think the government maybe need to do a little bit more about South Asian communities? Because remember when there was a forced marriage taking place, and the Home Office launched a campaign about forced marriage and all of this and I know many fathers actually went to jail for forcing their daughter or son to get married. As soon as they landed in Heathrow, they got arrested and locked away for X amount of time. But do you think the government need to do a little bit more in regards to that? Because I think you raise a very, very important issue, because many of our mothers, sisters, aunties, daughters, they may lack in education. Their English is not as perfect as we would like them to. They're not able to express. And the question is, so who do I go and explain, and who would believe me?
The government can definitely do more by investing, but I think it's down to us as a community to put those systems together, because they can't do that for us. We need to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the government can do so much, and you know, certain inputs can happen. I mean, I know that you spoke about the forced marriages. Yes, that was a positive move, but on the other hand, you're not looking at the detrimental impacts it's had, where, you know, females don't want to get their families into trouble. They just don't want to have a forced marriage, or they want to get married to who they choose, and they don't want to then hold that that guilt, that shame, that relationship breakdown would hold for a significant longer time than if they were not to incriminate their family members. And for that reason, there's a lot of females out there that prevented themselves from reporting forced marriages. So although it looks on paper and in front of people that it was a positive movement, on the other side, you know, there's less reporting. Now we have to question it. Have these things, because it's made a criminal offence, have these things now stopped? No, it's just stopped females from coming forward because they don't want to bear the consequences, because they don't want them to have criminal records and imprison them, and then they're going to have the extended family now pressurizing them, looking down on them, probably being further abusive as well. So it has caused a significant amount of issues from that. So in terms of what can the government do, I mean, it's not preventing anything. You're imprisoning, but you're not preventing it. So in terms of investment, you know, we have to think a little bit wider. But I agree with Farida, it starts within the community, because, you know, if the community don't start talking about it, if we don't start breaking stigmas, if we don't start breaking barriers, then, you know, we still are our own, you know, it's like we're our own worst enemies. You know, we're creating our barriers ourselves, and we're allowing that chain to reoccur for our sisters, our daughters, you know, our grandchildren's, and it keeps going on.
Yeah. And again, it boils down to so rape in marriage is now illegal, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And a lot of women don't know that it's illegal. I had a client who didn't know that it was illegal until we spoke about it. And then she told me, well, I've lost count of the amount of times I've been raped, if this is what rape is. So it really is about education and educating women and our community, not just women, actually, men as well, the whole of the community, about what's okay. Yeah.
So you guys are part and parcel of the community. You are our role models in the community. And I want you guys to directly tell our community leaders, there is loads of presidents, loads of secretaries, loads of chairmen. I've lost count number of organizations there is out there. There is so many mosques, and everybody can play a role. As a sister, as a mother, as a daughter of the community, I want you to tell them through our channel what they can do to support people who's going through those kind of difficulties that we are discussing today.
I think the first thing is to remove the stigma and the shame attached to it. So if somebody does come forward, it's not about stifling them or, brushing it under the carpet or saying, oh, this is going to bring shame on your family. It's about giving them the space to speak, listening and understanding. And I think that as a community, I keep on coming back to this point, but it's so important. We need to educate.
Yeah, I agree. Education is key. And being prepared to listen. Sometimes it's not just about, suppressing the females of talking. I mean, listen to how she's feeling, and rather than worrying too much about what society are going to say, what the family are going to say, what the community is going to say, is about how is she feeling, and being in her shoes and being able to walk in those shoes and say, well, if that was me, if that was my daughter, how would I feel? And hearing, and feeling that empathicness towards her, having that empathy as well. As a community, we have a responsibility. It's not just community leaders. I would say in the household, if you're a sister, if you're a brother, if you're an uncle, if you're a father or mother, it starts at home. It's not the community responsibility solely. The community begins at home. And it's about, why should a female put up with it? And one of the lines that really grates me is, okay, well, he's a man and, you're a female. Sometimes men are like that. And, you should have just kept quiet. You should have said, you shouldn't have said this, or, you should have just let him have vent his anger. And so it then comes, why is she coming to you then? You're blaming her.
Yeah, these norms need to be reversed.
Norms,
that cannot be normal. That cannot be acceptable. We need to challenge this as a community.
And then it's like, oh, if you sit there, you talk to him, he will understand. But when he's calm, gently go and speak to him. Things like that. Why is it a responsibility for the wife or the partner to then get him to understand? Why isn't the mother or the father or the brother saying, look, your behavior is uncalled for and this needs to stop. You need to treat her with respect. And respect is one thing that we need to start building on.
I was gonna just ask that to Shanaz and also Farida and Ruhena. In relationship, do you think there is a lack of trust, lack of respect, because lack of understanding? Because if you have those three are, I sincerely believe, is the foundation of any kind of relationship. And if you don't have that, then naturally there will be a problem.
Females generally have been seen as a less of a person, generically, not just in the BAME community, but generically they're seen as a less of a person than a man. And I think that we touched upon it earlier in the discussions, that how they are portrayed, and this trend and cycle seems to have followed, and a pattern keeps reoccurring, a pattern that is unhealthy. And I think that, we need to be able to recognize it first, and women need to be respected as a person, as a human, because why does it change when they become your wife? They are somebody's mother, they are somebody's sister or somebody's sister, a daughter. Why does it change when they come into another household?
And also what you said, they are fundamentals of a relationship, and they should be the normal expectations that we all have. So it is about setting our standards a bit higher. I mean, you said, is that part of every relationship? No, it's not part of every relationship. No. That's part of unhealthy relationships. And again, we need to make that very clear that this isn't the norm.
And educating on healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. Because I think where I was saying that cycle where children start growing up in unhealthy relationship, they've normalized this is what relationships supposed to be. And it takes some work. It's not that it can't happen. It just takes some work to then recognize that this is unhealthy and we need to break this cycle.
Shanaz?
Ultimately it ends up impacting everyone. I mean, I'm just going to say in general, I do quite a lot of mental health talk on my social media. So people do approach me, and one of the biggest advice, like the sister said, is just keep an open mind. Please don't oppose your opinions. Just listen. That's all you can do. The most important thing is when somebody comes to you, they just want to be heard. They don't want your opinion. They just want to be heard, and they just want to be listened to. So keep an open mind, whatever it is. And if you can support them, put them in the right direction. If you have got connections or any useful information you can give. At the moment, I would just, at the beginning, I'd always just say to people, just listen. And that's exactly what I do. And I think that's something we do. You know, it's a skill itself, and I think sometimes we just need to know that, you know, this is a time where I need to keep my opinions to myself.
One of the things that we do as part of the charity that I co-founded is around abuse, is that we train ambassadors, and that is about training local people to recognize, acknowledge, identify abuse, and being ambassadors in the community. So if somebody was to come and speak to you about abuse, they can then, you know, approach appropriately, advise appropriately. And, you know, and this is what was our idea behind this ambassadors program, is so that we can create these pyramids where there's more and more ambassadors out there, and people are then trained and educated to then feed back to victims and being able to support people one another.
Can I ask, Ruhena, I know today you done a online counseling session. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I delivered an online counseling assessment. Yes. Yeah.
And how does that work? And because obviously now the situation we are in and what everybody's going through, how can they get in contact with you or Shanaz or Farida, because you guys work in that particular field, and I'm sure there's many women out there who's probably looking at you and thinking, okay, maybe I can have a conversation with them in confidence, because you guys will understand where they're coming from. And how does the online thing works? Because in terms of confidentiality and all of that issues comes into play.
So my online work, I do it through video calling or telephone, and it's similar to if I was to be face to face and have contracting of confidentiality, the information what they tell me. I mean, obviously we have to adhere to all the safeguarding, but other than that, you know, they can contact me through the website, my telephone, you know. But this is one of the reasons why I set up Purple Cloud Therapy, because to be able to provide specialist counselling and therapy for the BAME community, because there isn't anything out there that's very specific. You know, trying to find Bengali counsellors out there was a nightmare, even for my immediate family members that I tried to find many years ago before I did my training. And so, yeah, it's just contacting and video calling. I mean, I prefer it in terms of working remotely at the moment rather than telephone, because then they get to see you. I suppose it has a bit more of a personal approach as opposed to just being a voice on the phone. But nonetheless, whatever is accessible for them, because not everyone has access to laptops or video phones. So for me, it's making sure that we can make provide therapy and make it accessible as possible to the wider community.
Shanaz, can I ask you? You also motivate people. I know I've seen many of your stories where you have motivated people to do something good for themselves, lose weight or get fitter, go walking, all sorts of stuff. And certainly, you motivates me at times when I see some of your
Glad to hear that.
some of your stories. And I want to ask, because I have had a quite lengthy discussion with many people, men and women both, in terms of gaining weight in that lockdown. And because the reason I'm specifically asking you that, because I know you do the work around that, what would you advise them? Apart from walking, what would you, because now the lockdown is easing, people are slowly trying to get to some sort of normality. What would you advise them?
Well, like I said, things are easy enough. So now we know the kind of what the situation. So there's no real excuse about it. I think this pandemic has really taught us one most important thing is there's nothing more important than your health. So looking after, number one, investing in yourself is such a crucial thing. As you know, gaining weight comes with so many illnesses. Not just walking, there's so many other physical activities you could do. It does release, endorphin. It does make you a lot more happier. So now you can start controlling your food, your habits, what your purpose in life is. And I think it's one of the things I always say to people, if you know what the real purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, doesn't matter if it's health, business, whatever the case may be, you succeed. So you need to know your why. Why is it that you're doing what you're doing? And if your why is really strong, then you'll be able to succeed it. So making good choices is not that difficult. It's by choice that
you make it sound so easy, but it's not that easy, is it?
It's not difficult. I think it's really important to balance things out. You cannot do the same thing day in, day out. Eventually you get boring, and we've had this discussion. It's not easy, but there are a lot of things that we have to do by choice. And it's a choice that you have to ask, is your health important enough? How important does it mean to you? You don't want to get to a stage of your life where you're not changing your habits, and before you know it, you are developing things like diabetes, cholesterols and back pains, knee pains and whatnot. And, a simple thing like that is causing you effects of praying, and if things are getting that bad, then it's time to make a change.
As I said right at the beginning, the time does go really fast, and we are coming almost to end of our show. I don't believe we can do justice to the both of this subject in 1 hour. It's not possible, and I think obviously there's more discussions need to be taken place within the communities, within individual families, within individual localities, about educating people, understanding what goes on. So, Ruhena, let me come to you. What would you say? You have 1 minute to say something to our viewers, what they should do or how they should support themselves, or how they should overcome the difficulties they are facing.
Okay, so in terms of the difficulties you're facing, there's support out there. It's about finding that support. I mean, I know that a lot of people are unaware the support out there, but you can contact your local authority. You can go to local community centres, even the schools that maybe your child is at. If you even talk to them, they are equipped with information. They are trained to support people like that, and know the signs and how to help your local GPs. These basic places where you can go if you are somebody that is supporting a victim or a family or a friend. Being as Shanaz said, being open-minded, being able to listen, have that ability to listen and point them in the right direction. You could probably make a huge amount of difference. They may need encouragement or just building their self-esteem, because it's not easy. And a lot of times, victims don't even acknowledge that they are in these situations, or it is abuse, or they are facing mental health, because it's not spoken about. They don't recognize it. They recognize it as like you're having a bad day, and especially females, we're like warriors. We're built like our mothers and our grandmothers, like you just get on with it. So we kind of follow that norm, like your mom had that many kids and your grandmother had it and she got on with it and she dealt with far more. And and sometimes you hear things like, well, she had to wash clothes with her hands, and now you have washing machines.
I can relate to you.
Yeah, so we're not that person, but at the same time, it's not to say that we can't get the help. But
Absolutely.
we are warriors, but it doesn't mean that we need to take the whole world on our shoulders. We can put it down and relieve ourselves, and finding good support, finding friends, finding people that you can open up to, that somebody that would listen. It doesn't have to be family. Family aren't always the best people to go to, as we said before. Sometimes they can be more judgmental and you feel a bit more ashamed or guilt. So I think sometimes the outside people. I mean, I myself personally, I relied on a lot from people on the outside that helped me more so than the inside, you know, because I felt that I could be myself. I can speak openly and honestly without feeling judged. You know, sometimes you're portraying a certain, I suppose, a certain persona and expectation, especially if, you know, depending on the hierarchy that you are in the family as well. You know, if you're the eldest daughter, the youngest daughter, there's different expectations. So I just think that we need to talk, and being able, like, giving ourselves permission to talk without feeling ashamed is one of them.
Farida?
It's quite difficult, especially right now, to reach out to people. So if you can't find somebody to talk to right now or share your thoughts with, write it down.
Yeah.
That will help. Be creative. Find different ways to look for different literature online. You can put it in translation and get it in Bengali, but try and educate yourself so you know what's going on, and use creativity. And as a community, let's have a lot more dialogue like this and look at how we can A, put in structures so that we have support, and B, how we can educate each other about domestic violence and mental health difficulties.
Shanaz?
Yes, I think recently, in general, if you want to gain more knowledge about mental health, I mean, I recently did first aid in mental health. I think when it comes to mental health, there isn't much awareness. There is a lot of awareness when it comes to physical health. Reach out, you know, things are opening up. Hopefully things, you know, the courses will be open. Reach out, gain yourself some knowledge. I did it personally, as I come across a lot of clients, a lot of people who approach me. So I wanted to have a vast knowledge and know how to direct people and put them in the right services and things like that. So that's really helped me. So I would say anyone here who can access and, you know, seek out courses and things like that, go and do it. You would learn so much, even just a general thing as how to be understanding what kind of things to look out for. So my advice is, yeah, go out. The service is there, you know, we're just there to use it, so go and use it. And hopefully, inshallah, you know what, this has been just such an eye-opener about language barrier. Inshallah, hopefully there are something that I can put in the pipeline. Maybe as, you know, us together, we can work on something so that it's easier for people to access us and it's easier for people to approach us, especially those who have language barriers. So inshallah.
And all three of you are on social media. And would it be okay for any of my viewers who are watching the show today, going through something similar with what we have discussed, or just want to get a little bit more advice, they can contact you and you will be happy to provide them whatever advice you possibly can.
Yes,
Absolutely.
100%.
Thank you so much, Shanaz, Farida,
you.
Ruhena, for joining me today. It's been wonderful, and I really hope that people have learned something from you three amazing individual women who you have contributed so much. And I think it would be unfair of me not to say on behalf of London Bangla, thank you for everything you guys do for the community and standing up for your rights and rights of others. So thank you for joining me today. Dear viewers, thank you for joining me. I know people have joined right across the world, from the world, you know, watching this show. Everything my audience, my guests have said is general, based on their experience and the work they have done. We have not discussed any specific issues. If you have any issues, you must always seek independent advice. If you are a man and if you suffer from domestic violence, I'm going to give you some numbers. So if you want to get pen and paper ready, you can contact Respect Men Advice line, which is 0808 800323. 0808 800323. If there is a national domestic abuse helpline run by refugees called, number is 0808 2000 247. You can always go on to their website. If you just type in national domestic abuse on the Google. Home Office have launched a campaign called You Are Not Alone. So there is a support out there, and you can contact various teams through that link that I have given you and numbers. If you suffer from mental health, anxiety, anything like that, depression, and you want to talk to somebody, there is Anxiety UK. The number is 03-444-775-774. There is a Mind, which is a well-known national charity that provides support for mental health, and the number is 0300-123-33393. Once again, 0300-123-33393. If you are a victim of domestic violence or abuse, you can always call 999. Often you may not be able to talk, and you can press 55 when prompted to do so. I hope the show was useful. Stay safe, look after each other. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.